Fay Jones, let me start with you. I personally find these mask conversations quite confusing at the moment because they are differing across all parts of the UK in terms of where they're supposed to be mandatory, where they're not. Also, for example, we've just seen Boris Johnson say that these are no longer mandatory, whereas Sadiq Khan has then popped up and says that, yes, they are. Surely, Faye, I want to put it to you first. Masks either work or they don't. And if they do, then why isn't your government making them mandatory?
Well, I think what we're moving to is a period of the pandemic where it's about personal responsibility. And like you, Michelle, I have had enough of wearing the mask. You know, we both wear glasses. The steam that you get when you go in, it just means you can't see. It's really irritating. But I recognise that they do prevent me from passing anything on to other people. So, you know, what we've got to do now is move towards this period where people are responsible for their own choices. And I trust people to make the right decisions. I think, you know, I do agree with you. It is confusing. I don't think it's really helpful that people are trying to go off on their own bat and making different decisions just for the sake of it. But we're used to that in Wales with Mark Drakeford. I think, you know, the British people can be trusted to know when they're expected to wear a mask, when they should, and when they're in an empty train carriage, like I'll be travelling home from London at the end of next week, really late on, there'll be nobody else in the carriage. So I probably will take my mask off then. I think we can trust people to be sensible.
David, let me come to you. I mean, I've just been introducing you there. You are the strategic director there for Transport for North. What will you be advising, recommending or mandating on your transport networks?
Well, the network in the north of England is really diverse. And as you've heard, there's a number of metro mayors and they're looking at different strategies. And essentially, our clear message is to follow the government guidance. And obviously the guidance there is that in crowded places, it's a good idea to continue wearing a mask. I think the other thing is that this is all about confidence of rail passengers, and we've seen confidence growing in recent weeks and people coming back to rail. So what we would want to see is a really clear message, and whatever the guidance, the rules are, that operators actually just make that really, really clear to passengers. They just want clarity. It's not just about masks, it's about buying tickets, it's about cleanliness. All these things together improve confidence of passengers.
And Faye, let me just ask you, I mentioned there people crossing borders. Now, when you've got such different policies, say, I don't know, if you're on a train going from Wales to England, or I don't know, Wales to somewhere in the north of England or wherever, what happens then when you start crossing boundaries? Are you expected to have your mask on for half of it, take it off for the second half? Like, how would a passenger know what to do?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm not clear about that either. The Welsh Government has said today that they're going to be spending money on a public information campaign to make it clear to tourists. I think they could have saved that money and perhaps just aligned with England instead. It's not clear, but we do. We need to make it clear to tourists. The last thing we want is people deciding not to come to Wales. Brecon and Radnorshire is the most beautiful part of the country. I know I'm slightly biased, but it is. I want people to come here. I want people to feel comfortable. So I understand that the mask is going to be part of life for the foreseeable, but not forever. We need to phase it out. And I think that's what the government in England and the United Kingdom is doing. It's just a shame the Welsh Government's not there yet.
And David, when we talk about rail travel, if masks were to be mandated across all of rail networks, do you have a worry that that might stop some people wanting to get on the rail and instead actually take their cars, which is one of the things that we're trying to avoid people doing?
So, yeah, you're right that the network across the north really, really diverse, and we want confidence is absolute key. And so the mask wearing has been part of that, but we haven't seen that put people off return to rail. So we're back up to, we were as low as perhaps 5% of normal passengers in the height of the pandemic, 30% last September. We're now well over 50%, and on some days, particularly when the sun shines, as it does often in the north of England, we've had near 100% levels of normal passengers. So the evidence is that passengers are willing to come back. We work with Transport Focus, who do regular passenger surveys, and they're saying that 9 in 10 of regular passengers feel safe on rail. So the measures the operators are taking seem to be working. And the mask wearing is only one element of this. The other big thing in the north of England is a lot of people haven't been on rail for a long time. We've now got actually much better quality service. There's 500 new carriages in operation. The end of the dreaded pacers in the north have all gone now. So the service is much better and more reliable than it ever is. So it's all part of a package, and we're working with the train operators to encourage people to these great destinations we've got in the north, as well as Wales, of course.
I just want to end with a quick question for you. We talk about personal responsibility and doing the right thing and thinking indeed of others. But to me, the sentiment when it comes to thinking of others only seems to extend to people that perhaps don't want to wear a mask. They're expected to think of other people. And the bit that is missing for me is, you've got a lot of people, for example, that have hearing difficulties, that rely on lip reading, etc. There doesn't seem to be a request the opposite direction for those people that want to wear masks to actually think of others on the opposite side of the fence that perhaps don't want to for various different reasons.
Yeah, you make a reasonable point. And I think, we've got to stop being so divisive about this. I fully understand that there are people who want to carry on wearing the mask because they feel safer. That's really important. But equally, there's people who want to take it off. And I think the last thing that we should do is get into a confrontation over wearing masks. And if you feel so strongly about it, then, maybe you need to think about where you're spending your time over the next few weeks. I'm really disappointed that in Wales, we're going to have to carry on wearing them in all public places, except for pubs and hospitality. And particularly when you consider the constituency that I have, where we share the border with England, I can well imagine people will think, well, I'm not going to go into the shop in Hay-on-Wye, which is in Wales. I'm going to pop across the border into England because I just can't be bothered wearing the mask. I just wish that we hadn't made this a divisive issue. We could have done this on a four nations approach, everybody working with each other rather than trying to use the mask as a weapon.
Indeed. Fay Jones and David Hogarth, thank you very much for your time. Now, let me go back to my two surfer friends. On my thing, it says, you are both social commentators. Two social commentators. What a treat for me. Let me start with you, James. What's your view in terms of this mask? In particular, what I would term simplistically is just the whole confused mixed messages. These things either work or they don't. And if they do, then surely it should be mandated to wear them. And if they don't, then what we're messing around for?
No, I completely agree about the confusion with the messaging. I think that's a mistake to start with. I think the scientific consensus is that masks protect other people more than they protect you. So if you have COVID or if you're ill and you cough, the mask is supposed to protect other people from the kind of the saliva that you may emit into the environment. I think I'm in favour of the opening up on the 19th of July. I think most people are vaccinated now. All the vulnerable are vaccinated. However, I think we should keep the mask mandate a little bit longer, because I think, as much as I find them wearing the mask annoying, I think the issue isn't really an issue of personal responsibility when it's about protecting others. So someone may take personal responsibility, wear a mask themselves, but if someone's on the tube carriage with COVID and they're not wearing a mask, it doesn't really help you much. So I think a bit longer, just until we've vaccinated the rest of the people that are vaccinating.
Well, Emma, James mentions there the scientific consensus. I mean, I've spent quite a bit of time this afternoon looking at various different studies, looking at what the different health organisations have to say on masks, and there seems to be quite a contradiction. You can read one study and think, absolutely, yeah, masks are the best thing since sliced bread. You can look at another one and actually they seem to contradict what you've just seen. And this is the challenge in all of this for me. Like, when I think of these masks, I'll pick this one up off the floor. The state of some of these masks, I won't embarrass anyone at GBNews, but I saw in the dressing room today, before I came on, I was going to bring it on, I decided against it. One of these, it was absolutely filthy. It was filthy. And I can only assume that person had been using it and probably will continue to use it. And this is my issue with all of this. When you even look at the studies, Emma, they are all about these kind of high-grade masks. They're not talking about these things and these daft cloth masks that people make themselves and never wash and wear them all over again. So I don't believe that these are protecting people in the way that people are suggesting that they do. That was my rant. Sorry. What I meant to say is, what do you think?
Well, I was looking at the British Medical Journal on the way here, and it is quite clear that there is quite a distinction to be made between medical-grade masks and the sorts of cloth masks that you buy in the shops. And actually, in other countries, they have made specifications about what counts as the sort of mask that you should wear in other European countries. But it is a very good point that there is scientific dissent on this. It's just that certain positions seem to get more of a hearing. But I think that the confusion around wearing masks and the whole debate and conflict about masks actually doesn't have as much to do with the science as it does to do with the politics. And I wonder whether or not come the 19th, when in England, obviously not in Wales, people can use their own discretion about whether or not they want to wear them, that wearing masks will become almost a way of politically signalling something, almost virtue signalling, saying I'm wearing a mask because I care more about other people, and that really will have a lot to do with the sort of social pressure of people almost being shamed into wearing them.
Of course.
But it was quite interesting that Chris Whitty, when talking about wearing a mask, said that he would wear one if he thought that it would make others feel uncomfortable if he didn't, ignoring the fact that obviously, as you pointed out, it might make people uncomfortable to see lots of people in masks, to see a whole host of people with their faces covered up, particularly people, as you say, with hearing difficulties. It's a strange thing, I think, for Drakeford to suggest continuing with this mask mandate beyond the 19th. I think very similar to Scotland, this has a lot to do with political posturing, possibly, but also because, as you say, all the vulnerable have been vaccinated, over 90%. And also in Wales, as in England, ONS statistics suggested that 9 out of 10 people in both England and Wales have antibodies regardless of whether they're vaccinated because they've got the virus and they've survived it, even if they're in a younger age group that hasn't been vaccinated. So I wonder whether this actually has very much to do with the science at all.
Welcome to the GB News YouTube channel. You can watch us live 24 hours a day, catch up on your favourite shows and join in the conversation in the comments below.
Don't forget to subscribe and you'll never miss any of our exclusive content.